The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculate grounds of Buckingham Palace. This peaceful ambiance was abruptly shattered by the shrill voice of Karen Mitchell. Her designer handbag swung wildly as she gesticulated aggressively at a palace staff member whose patience seemed to be wearing thin. "What do you mean the last entry was 30 minutes ago?" she demanded, her American accent sharp with indignation. "Do you know how much I paid for this trip? Do you have any idea who I am?" She thrust her phone forward, its screen displaying what appeared to be a business card for a mid-level real estate agency in Connecticut. The staff member, a dignified gentleman in his 50s, maintained his professional composure. "I apologize, madam," he stated calmly, "but the palace visiting hours are clearly posted. For security reasons, we cannot make exceptions." "Security reasons?" Karen scoffed, running a manicured hand through her meticulously styled blonde bob. "Look around. There are still people inside. What's the difference if one more person goes in?" She gestured toward the palace windows, where the last tour group was still visible, making their way through the staterooms. A young couple with 2 children quietly stepped away from the entrance. The mother whispered something in French to her husband, creating distance between themselves and Karen's growing tantrum. The father nodded, guiding their family toward the palace gardens instead. "The difference, madam," the staff member explained with practiced patience, "is that our last tour group entered during regular visiting hours. We maintain strict schedules to ensure—" "Oh, spare me the bureaucratic nonsense," Karen interrupted, her voice rising further. "This is exactly what's wrong with this country. Too many rules, too many people hiding behind protocol instead of using common sense." She adjusted her designer sunglasses, a gesture that seemed calculated to draw attention to their expensive brand. A group of Japanese tourists paused their photography session, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and fascination as Karen continued her tirade. An elderly British couple shook their heads disapprovingly, the woman muttering something about "these sorts of people" to her husband. "I demand to speak to your supervisor," Karen announced, assuming the battle stance familiar to service workers worldwide. "Clearly you don't understand that some rules are meant to be flexible for the right people." Her emphasis on right carried all the entitlement of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. The staff member's posture remained impeccable, though something in his eyes suggested he'd faced this particular brand of tourist before. "My supervisor would tell you exactly the same thing, madam. The palace's security protocols are not negotiable. Perhaps you would like information about tomorrow's tours." Karen's face flushed a deep red, a stark contrast to her pastel designer blouse. "Tomorrow? Tomorrow? I'm not some common tourist who can just change their plans on your whim. I have a schedule. I have standards." Her voice had reached a pitch that sent nearby pigeons scattering into the air. It was then that her gaze locked onto the stoic royal guard standing at attention nearby. Something shifted in her expression, a calculating look that suggested she had found a new target for her frustration. Her grip tightened on her handbag as she abruptly turned away from the staff member, her heels clicking against the pavement with determined purpose. "Fine," she announced, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "If you won't help me, I'll find someone who will. Someone who actually matters around here." Her eyes never left the guard as she began walking towards him, her entire bearing suggesting she was about to show everyone exactly how important she thought she was. The staff member opened his mouth as if to warn her, but she was already out of earshot, her designer heels carrying her toward what would prove to be a profound lesson in respect and tradition. As Karen approached the royal guard, her heels struck the pavement with the sharp precision of someone used to commanding attention. Her designer sunglasses were now perched atop her head like a crown, allowing everyone to see the entitled determination in her eyes. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying the same imperious tone she used with waiters who brought her the wrong wine. "Yes, you, the one in the furry hat. I need you to help me with something." She positioned herself directly in front of the guard, deliberately invading his personal space. The guard remained utterly motionless, his eyes fixed forward with the unwavering discipline of years of military service. His scarlet tunic gleamed in the late afternoon sun, each brass button and medal telling its own story of dedication and service, stories Karen was too self-absorbed to read. "Hello? I'm talking to you." She waved, her manicured hand in front of his face, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "Is this part of the show? Playing statue while paying customers or being mistreated?" Her voice rose with each question, drawing uncomfortable glances from passing tourists. A middle-aged couple hurried their children past, the father quietly explaining to his curious daughter why the lady's behavior was inappropriate. Karen either didn't notice or didn't care about the example she was setting. "Look," she continued, her tone becoming more condescending, "I understand you have your little routine here. It's cute, really. Very quaint." She adjusted her Gucci blouse, a habitual gesture that seemed designed to remind everyone of her self-perceived status. "But surely we can drop the act for a moment, and you can tell your colleagues to let me into the palace. I'm not just anybody, you know." The guard's bearing remained perfect, though someone with military experience might have noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw, the only visible sign that he was indeed hearing every word. "This is ridiculous," Karen announced to no one in particular, though she was clearly playing to the growing audience of uncomfortable onlookers. "I've been to Disney World, and even their character actors know when to break character for important guests." She dug through her designer handbag, producing a business card with a flourish. "Here, Karen Mitchell, luxury real estate. I sell multi-million-dollar properties. I'm the sort of person you want to accommodate." When the guard didn't react to her credentials, her frustration visibly mounted. "Are you even listening to me, or is all this," she gestured vaguely at his uniform, "just for show? Because right now you're not showing very good customer service skills." A group of British citizens had paused nearby, their expressions darkening at her dismissive attitude toward their tradition. An elderly man wearing a veteran's pin on his lapel watched with particular interest, his weathered face showing the calm recognition of someone who understood exactly what Karen was failing to grasp. "You know what?" Karen's voice took on the sharp edge of someone unused to being ignored. "I don't think you're even a real soldier. No real military man would just stand there while a lady needed assistance. This whole thing is probably just a tourist trap, actors playing dress-up for the cameras." She leaned closer, her expensive perfume invading the air around them. "And not very good actors at that." The guard's discipline held firm, but there was a change in the atmosphere, subtle but palpable, like the pressure drop before a storm. His eyes remained fixed ahead, but they carried the weight of someone who had seen real service, real combat, real sacrifice. Concepts as foreign to Karen as the idea that she might not be the most important person in any given situation. Her hand gripped her handbag tighter, knuckles whitening with growing rage. To someone who viewed the world entirely through the lens of customer service and social status, being ignored was more than just an inconvenience. It was an insult she couldn't tolerate. You? People clearly don't understand how things work in the real world. Karen's voice rose further, taking on the shrill edge that had made her infamous at every country club she'd frequented. The sound cut through the afternoon air like expensive crystal being scraped across marble. Sharp, unpleasant. And speaking of privilege, when someone of my standing speaks to you, you respond. It's basic courtesy, not that you'd know anything about that standing here like some wind-up toy. Her Hermes scarf fluttered in the breeze as she tilted her head, the designer label visible for all to see, a habit born from years of measuring worth by brand names. The pearls at her neck caught the sunlight, each one perfect and likely real, much like the facade she'd spent years cultivating in Connecticut's most exclusive social circles. She began circling the guard like a predator, though her attempt at intimidation was somewhat undermined by the click of her designer heels against the ancient stones. Each step echoed with entitled authority, the same cadence she used when patrolling open houses or inspecting waitstaff at her charity lunches. I bet you're not even qualified for a real military position. That's why they have you playing dress-up out here, isn't it? Couldn't make it in actual service, so they gave you a fancy hat and told you to stand still. The guard's ceremonial rifle remained perfectly steady, its brass fittings gleaming with the kind of polish that spoke of hours of dedication. Dedication Karen mistook for subservience. Her reflection distorted across its surface, fracturing her carefully maintained appearance into something closer to her true nature. The elderly veteran shifted his weight, years of military discipline barely containing his reaction to her words. His campaign medals clinked softly against each other, each one earned in moments of valor that Karen's privileged world couldn't begin to comprehend. Nearby, a young mother covered her son's ears, hurrying him away from the scene, whispering something that sounded like, "Not how we behave, darling." The growing crowd watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as Karen continued her tirade, their phones lowered out of respect for the guard's dignity rather than interest in her display. "Let me explain something to you about authority." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that still carried across the courtyard like poison. Her breath smelled of expensive coffee and entitlement, the kind of combination that had cowed service workers throughout New England. Real authority comes from success, from status. I drive a Mercedes, I live in a gated community, I'm on the board of 3 different charity organizations. Each statement was delivered like a weapon, meant to wound what she perceived as lower-class resistance. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light as she gestured, each flash a reminder of the wealth she wielded like armor. The guard's posture remained perfect, but there was something in his bearing now, a presence that seemed to grow stronger with each insult, like steel being tempered in fire. His ceremonial rifle gleamed in the fading sunlight, its polished surface reflecting Karen's contorted expression back at her. Years of military service had taught him about real authority, the kind earned through sacrifice, not purchased with platinum credit cards. A slight breeze stirred his plume, the only movement in his otherwise statue-like stance. It carried with it the faint scent of Karen's Chanel No. 5, a fragrance that probably cost more than a week of guard duty pay, yet couldn't mask the growing sourness of her disposition. "Oh, still playing soldier?" she mocked, her frustration mounting at his continued silence. Her manicured fingers drummed against her designer handbag, a nervous tell that betrayed the first crack in her confident facade. "Does the Queen know you're out here embarrassing her country, making paying tourists feel unwelcome?" She fumbled in her bag, producing her phone with the same flourish she used to brandish business cards at networking events. "Maybe we should call her. I'm sure she'd love to hear about how her toy soldiers are treating important visitors." The phone's case was leather and monogrammed, because even her accessories needed to announce their expense to the world. She held it like a weapon, though against the guard's unwavering discipline, it seemed as ineffective as her previous attempts at intimidation. A group of American tourists had stopped to watch, their faces burning with second-hand embarrassment. One whispered to another, "She's not with us," as if trying to distance themselves from their countrywoman's behavior. Their own phones remained pocketed. This wasn't entertainment. It was a display of everything wrong with entitled tourism. "You know what your problem is?" Karen's voice took on the same tone she used when berating restaurant managers. "You think this uniform, this little act of yours, makes you special. But let me tell you something. I've seen better security guards at the mall back home. At least they know how to treat VIP customers with respect." The veteran had moved closer now, his campaign medals catching the light. Each one told a story of real service, real sacrifice, concepts that seemed as foreign to Karen as the idea that she might not be the center of the universe. "This is your last chance," she announced, her voice trembling with rage. "Either drop this ridiculous act and help me, or I'll make sure everyone knows how you treat respectable visitors. I have connections, you know. One phone call and I could—" Her voice cut off abruptly as a young boy in the crowd asked his father, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Dad, why is that angry lady being so mean to the soldier?" The innocent question seemed to hang in the air, highlighting the absurdity of her behavior. But rather than causing her to reflect, the child's question only seemed to fuel her anger. Her face flushed deeper red, and her hand gripped her designer bag so tightly, the leather creaked. She was building toward something that would cross a line even she hadn't dared approach until now. "You think you're better than me?" she hissed, her composure cracking like cheap veneer. "Stand in there in your costume, ignoring someone who could buy and sell your entire year's salary with one commission check?" Her free hand raised slowly, trembling with rage. "Well, let me show you what I think of your precious protocol." The air seemed to crystallize with tension as her hand drew back, the afternoon sun catching her diamond rings, a glittering testament to the wealth she thought could shield her from consequences. The crowd held its collective breath, recognizing the moment when entitlement was about to collide head-on with immovable dignity. The slap cracked across the courtyard like a gunshot. Karen's manicured hand connected with the guard's cheek in a strike that seemed to echo off the palace walls. Several tourists gasped, a child began to cry, and someone in the crowd muttered, "Bloody hell," under their breath. The sound hung in the air like an accusation, a moment of violence that would forever alter the afternoon's peaceful facade. The guard's head hadn't moved an inch. Her hand had struck true, leaving an angry red mark on his cheek, but his posture remained unchanged, his discipline unshaken. If anything, his bearing seemed to grow more powerful, more present in the shocked silence that followed. Karen stood there, her hand still raised, a mix of triumph and uncertainty flickering across her face. Perhaps she had expected him to break character, to crumble under her assault. Instead, she found herself confronting something she'd never encountered before. Dignity that couldn't be slapped away, strength that had nothing to do with power over others. "There!" she declared, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Maybe now you'll learn to show proper respect." Then, a word cut through the courtyard like a blade, quiet but carrying the authority of command. The guard's eyes, which had remained fixed forward throughout her entire tirade, now turned to meet hers directly. In that gaze was not anger, not hatred, but something far more terrifying, the calm, measured assessment of a warrior who had faced far worse than an entitled tourist. A pin dropping would have echoed in the silence that followed. Even the pigeons seemed to pause their cooing, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The red mark on the guard's cheek stood out against his skin, not as a sign of weakness, but as evidence of her own profound lack of dignity. "In my 12 years of service," the guard continued, his voice carrying the weight of real authority, "I've been shot at in Afghanistan, faced mortar fire in Iraq, and lost brothers in arms on foreign soil." His words were measured, precise, each one landing like a hammer blow against Karen's crumbling facade. "The uniform you mock has been soaked with the blood of those who died defending the very freedom you abuse." Karen took an involuntary step backward, her designer heel catching on the pavement. The guard's presence seemed to fill the entire courtyard now, his bearing no longer merely ceremonial, but radiating the true military authority that lay beneath the tradition. "This costume, as you call it, is worn with the pride of centuries of service. Each button, each medal, each crease represents the sacrifice of those who stood guard, not just over a palace, but over the principles of duty, honor, and respect." His voice remained level, but carried an intensity that made Karen's earlier shouting seem childish in comparison. The elderly veteran had moved closer, standing at parade rest, his own service medals glinting in the fading sunlight. His presence added silent testimony to the guard's words, decades of shared sacrifice and understanding bridging the generations between them. Karen's mouth opened and closed, her carefully maintained composure dissolving under the weight of real authority. Her hand, the one she had used to strike him, now hung limply at her side, the diamond tennis bracelet no longer gleaming quite so proudly. "The mark you left," the guard's eyes flickered briefly to the growing crowd, "will fade in minutes, but the mark you've left on your own character, that will last considerably longer." His gaze returned to her, carrying not just authority now, but something closer to pity. "Was it worth it, madam? Did striking a combat veteran make you feel more important?" I didn't," Karen stammered, her carefully constructed world of privilege beginning to crack. The veteran stepped forward, his bearing still militarily straight despite his age. "2 tours in Afghanistan," he said, his voice carrying the gravelly weight of experience. "That's what the medal on his chest represents, the one you just assaulted. It's not awarded for standing still, ma'am. It's awarded for valor under fire." He gestured to his own decorations. "I earned mine in the Falklands, watching men younger than him make sacrifices you couldn't begin to comprehend." Karen's designer glasses slipped from her head, clattering to the ground unnoticed. The crowd had grown silent, bearing witness to a lesson in humility being delivered with surgical precision. While you were concerning yourself with property values and country club memberships, the veteran continued, men wearing this uniform were patrolling hostile territories, risking their lives to protect the very freedoms you take for granted. His eyes met the guards in a moment of shared understanding, including the freedom to make a fool of yourself in public. A younger man stepped forward from the crowd, his bearing marking him as military despite his civilian clothes. RAF, sir, he addressed the guard with quiet respect. 2 years ago, your unit provided cover for our evacuation in Elmond Province. Lost 2 of your men making sure our wounded got out. The guard nodded, almost imperceptibly, the shared sacrifice hanging unspoken in the air between them. Karen's face had lost all color, her earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization of exactly what kind of man she had struck. The bearskin cap you mocked. The veteran's voice took on an edge of steel earned in battle. The ceremonial rifle you dismissed represents centuries of service to crown and country. Every part of this uniform tells a story of sacrifice, duty, and honor. Concepts that clearly need explaining to someone who measures worth by the price of their handbag. Karen's grip on her designer bag had loosened, the status symbol suddenly seeming insignificant against the weight of real service. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the shame that was beginning to color her cheeks. I watched men die wearing this uniform. The guard spoke again, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had commanded in battle, not just boardrooms. Young men, brave men, who understood something you clearly don't. That some things in this world are worth standing for, worth sacrificing for, worth protecting. Not because they bring wealth or status, but because they represent values greater than any individual. 2 police officers had appeared at the edge of the crowd, their presence professional but unhurried. They recognized what was happening, not just an arrest in the making, but a necessary lesson being delivered. Each morning, the guard continued, the red mark on his cheek now fading like Karen's pretensions of superiority. We spend hours preparing this uniform, not for tourist photos, not for show, but out of respect for every man and woman who has worn it before us, who has died wearing it, who understood its true meaning. The veteran touched his campaign medals again, each one a testament to battles fought long ago. The discipline you mocked? It's not an act. It's the same discipline that keeps men standing their ground under fire, that helps them put duty before comfort, service before self. Something that can't be bought with any amount of real estate commissions. So, what happens now? The guard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. The law regarding assault of a royal guard is quite clear. But more than any legal consequence, you'll have to live with the knowledge that your moment of entitlement led you to strike a combat veteran. Someone who's bled for the freedoms you abuse. The police officers moved forward with quiet efficiency. One of them, a female officer with graying temples, spoke with the weary recognition of someone who'd seen this scene before. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Assaulting a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces is a serious offense. Karen's expensive mascara had begun to run, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. Her earlier bravado had crumbled entirely, replaced by the hollow realization of someone seeing themselves clearly for the first time. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't think— No, the veteran interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. You didn't think. You saw a uniform and assumed it was a costume. You saw discipline and mistook it for weakness. You saw tradition and confused it with theater. He straightened his jacket, his medals catching the late afternoon sun. That's the problem with people like you. You've spent so long believing money equals power that you've forgotten what real strength looks like. The guard had resumed his position, his bearing as perfect as it had been before Karen's assault. But there was something different. Now, a tangible aura of authority that had nothing to do with ceremony and everything to do with the warrior beneath the uniform. "Take a good look," the veteran said, gesturing to the guard as the police officers gently but firmly took Karen's arms. "That man you struck? He'll continue standing his post with the same discipline and dignity he showed under your attack. The same discipline he showed under enemy fire. Not because it's his job, but because he understands something you clearly need to learn. That some things in this world are worth standing for, worth sacrificing for, worth protecting. Not because they bring wealth or status, but because they represent values greater than any individual." Two police officers had appeared at the edge of the crowd, their presence professional but unhurried. They recognized what was unfolding, not just an arrest in the making, but a necessary lesson being delivered. "Each morning," the guard continued, the red mark on his cheek now fading like Karen's pretensions of superiority, "we spend hours preparing this uniform. Not for tourist photos, not for show, but out of respect for every man and woman who has worn it before us, who has died wearing it, who understood its true meaning." The veteran standing by touched his campaign medals again, each one a testament to battles fought long ago. "The discipline you mocked? It's not an act. It's the same discipline that keeps men standing their ground under fire, that helps them put duty before comfort, service before self. Something that can't be bought with any amount of real estate commissions." "So what happens now?" the guard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The law regarding assault of a royal guard is quite clear. But more than any legal consequence, you'll have to live with the knowledge that your moment of entitlement led you to strike a combat veteran, someone who's bled for the freedoms you abuse." The police officers moved forward with quiet efficiency. One of them, a female officer with graying temples, spoke with the weary recognition of someone who'd seen this scene countless times before. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Assaulting a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces is a serious offense." Karen's expensive mascara had begun to run, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. Her earlier bravado had crumbled entirely, replaced by the hollow realization of someone seeing themselves clearly for the very first time. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't think—" "No," the veteran interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "You didn't think. You saw a uniform and assumed it was a costume. You saw discipline and mistook it for weakness. You saw tradition and confused it with theater." He straightened his jacket, his medals catching the late afternoon sun. "That's the problem with people like you. You've spent so long believing money equals power that you've forgotten what real strength looks like." The guard had resumed his position, his bearing as perfect as it had been before Karen's assault. But there was something different now. A tangible aura of authority that had nothing to do with ceremony and everything to do with the warrior beneath the uniform. "Take a good look," the veteran said, gesturing to the guard as the police officers gently but firmly took Karen's arms. "That man you struck? He'll continue standing his post with the same discipline and dignity he showed under your attack. The same discipline he showed under enemy fire. Not because it's his job, but because he understands something you clearly need to learn. That true respect isn't demanded, it's earned." Karen's designer handbag slipped from her grasp as the officers began leading her away. The young boy who had spoken earlier watched with wide, solemn eyes as his father explained in hushed tones about respect, dignity, and the profound meaning of service. The hushed crowd slowly began to disperse, but not before several individuals approached the veteran, shaking his hand, their gratitude for his service a silent, heartfelt chorus. The RAF officer, a witness to the unfolding drama, offered a crisp, silent salute to both the unwavering guard and the stoic veteran before he, too, departed. A powerful, unspoken acknowledgement of shared understanding between warriors. As the sun dipped lower over Buckingham Palace, painting the courtyard in long, fading shadows, the guard remained at his post. The angry red mark on his cheek had vanished completely. Yet, the profound lesson he'd helped deliver would undoubtedly leave an indelible impression on everyone who had witnessed it. The veteran lingered for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the guard with a knowing, almost paternal understanding. "They don't make them any different, do they?" he murmured to himself, a soft, grateful sigh escaping his lips. Thank God for that. With a final, respectful nod, he turned and walked away, his campaign medals glinting softly in the fading evening light.